I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Welcome, everyone, to our next episode of GM Tools, which has been popular in the Twitch polls and has been our episode pretty much all of the times, almost, since it started going up, other than interviews and a few other interspersed episodes. Today is That Wasn't the Plan, an episode all about... because a lot of our other episodes were about, like, oh yeah, we're going to figure out how to do this thing. But this is the episode about not knowing what the heck you're doing. About improvising, whether improvising on purpose, which I sometimes do, or improvising because the PCs do something totally unexpected, or improvising for any other reason that might come up during the game. Maybe the dice do something really weird, such as kill off one of the PCs or an important NPC in an extremely unlikely fluke of dice combinations. You never know when you're going to need to improvise. Mm-hmm. We're here with some tips.
Maybe the players decide, oh yeah, you were thinking that we were going to explore over here. Well, I mean, actually, this just came up in a conversation with some other Paizo folks last night. The idea that some people were running Skull and Shackles, and then they had trouble because their PCs were like, oh, wait a minute, we've got a ship. Well, we're going to go all the way over here instead of following what it is in this adventure.
Yep. It certainly helped in our Skull and Shackles game that we had a crazily religious to Besmara swashbuckler as the captain, who simply believed that any small amount of plot hook that was dangled in front of the ship was a divine sign from Besmara, who was testing the group and wanted to force them to do some crazy difficult thing for her own amusement and would give them treasure. And then if we bored Besmara by just doing something else, that we would have her disfavor, and then suddenly catastrophe would happen.
That was an amazingly useful player-created tool as a GM to keep folks on track. But that's not the kind of thing that you're going to have fall into your lap very often.
Well, I try to help.
And you do.
But, yes, usually your players will not, work specifically to try to make it so that a plot line that is very hard to enforce and get across actually works pretty much as a railroad. It does sometimes depend on your player's style. There is a play style called the Facilitator that is in some books about GMing play styles. It's usually a beneficial player to have because of the fact that they can often help you keep the plot on track. They want the story to go well, and they usually pay a lot of attention. They are usually very deeply sort of tied in and catch your details and try to help the story, but they can become a problem player if other people are just doing random stuff and the facilitator gets angry that these random things are wasting time or going off in arbitrary directions. So sometimes you might have to improvise because you have someone who is too good at helping you not improvise.
Yes.
Certainly playstyle clashes are one of the reasons that improvisation might have to come up. And Statler says, usually players relish the opportunity to go against the GM plans. It really depends on the player. Like, I'm more of a facilitator, although definitely when it comes to solving problems, I might come up with very creative solutions to those problems that are not with the GM plan, but I usually try to keep the plot on the direction the GM is clearly going, rather than just bust the plot up, if that makes sense.
But sometimes it can feel like players are actively going against your plans just, because you're like, oh, I've prepared all this stuff, and like, oh no, they're exploring that one place, aren't they? The one place I didn't detail. The one thing I wasn't sure yet what I was going to do with that. Or that section oh crud, they picked up on this lead too early, and now they're going to something from like 2 parts of the AP ahead, and now what do I do?
And Stetler's not wrong that there are a lot of people who actually literally take
totally
glee in the fact that they have chosen an option that was completely outside of the plans. So
Mm-hmm.
that is absolutely true. So we've talked a little bit about how you can wind up in a situation where you have to improvise, but let's talk a little bit about how to improvise. And to start off, we should underline some basic principles before we get into more details about how to deal with each specific situation. It might not surprise you to know that some of the same tools that are good for improvising in a role playing game that's gone astray are the tools that are taught in any improv class. For example, there's a tool in improv classes of yes and that is usually taught where it's when someone comes into the scene and is like, all right, we're driving in the car, and then the next person comes in, they're not supposed to just come up and say, oh, but I shot you all dead in the car, and now we're doing this other thing. But it's like, okay, we're driving the car, but then and then a dinosaur comes or
Mm-hmm.
something. Like you try to add to what people said instead of negating them in improv because it's easier to deal with. For a GM, that's often becomes a yes but because of the fact that the GM is dealing with the consequences of the world. It might be a yes and, but it's
Mm-hmm.
often a yes but where the player is like, well, I don't want to go into this house where the enemies are. I'm going to burn it down. It's like, okay, yeah, you can, but all of the treasure is also going to get burned down. Uh, so you won't get that, but you absolutely could burn it. It's made of wood.
Mm-hmm.
The enemies will possibly have to come rushing out. You'll get what's on them that they could grab because they probably want to grab their loot. But if you're willing to burn up the rest of the treasure or evidence that you guys might need that's in the building because it's too risky to do the fights,
Mm-hmm.
that's a risk reward that you can choose. So,
Yeah, or maybe they'll have the opponents have all their valuable treasure on them, but the fact that this building is burning is going to be catching the attention of some other folks in the town, and then the PCs may eventually be called in to in an investigation for the cause of the arson. Like maybe the people in the inside of the building don't like the PCs, and they make it clear that the PCs are responsible to the town guards, and then the PCs have to deal with that.
or as we said during the intrigue episode, it's possible you were hired by a local noble and then it's just as bad for that noble that you burned down a building as it would have been if you didn't get the blackmail material that was the blackmailers in the building had. So
Mm-hmm.
there's usually consequences to any action, and instead of saying, "Oh, you can't do that," you let the PCs do what they want to do, and you give some consequences. And if they're consequences that would be obvious to the PCs without like you having to metagame to tell them, like the fact that everything's gonna burn in the building, you can even tell them. It's like you are the portal to the world
Mm-hmm.
of the game for the PCs, and that means things that would be obvious to their characters. It's sort of your duty to tell them, like if they're like we're gonna burn it down, and you know the building's made of stone, and you just don't even tell them it's made of stone. You're like, okay, you can try to burn it down. And they're like, okay, great, we'll get some accelerant, and they spend like an hour,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, all right, and we set it all up and light a match and put it on the building. And you're like, okay, that's great, but it was made of stone, so nothing happens. Then they're gonna feel like you cheated them
Yeah.
out of it at the last minute, even if you absolutely knew it was made of stone and it was in the adventure, and you're like, oh, well, look, here's the adventure, and it says it's made of stone.
And if it's something that may not be 100% obvious to literally every character, but that characters with certain knowledge or other experiences might know, I often will prompt for a some kind of a skill check to see if they noticed something that would be relevant to them, and then they can feel like, okay, well, we were going to do this, but I was the one who knew why this may have some other consequences. So then it's not, and they can still choose to do it at that point because they know what's going to happen. A few things. Also, it's important to make sure that when you're setting up this like action and reaction from the world, that it doesn't feel like you as the GM are being vindictive or trying to punish the players for going outside of the box, but really that it's sort of like a thinking about how the world would naturally react, because sometimes these creative solutions that players have will pretty much just make things easier for them, and that's okay too.
Yeah, that's a time that's not a yes, but
Yeah, that's a yes and yeah.
you have to be true to the story. You have to be true to the world. If you are, players will be very accepting of the but because it makes sense. If you're not, or especially if you, even if you are, but you just don't tell them until the last minute, it'll feel bad, even if you knew it was made of stone, because you are, you're that lens, and you bring the players into the world. It's up to you to tell them about things, and if you tell them right away, as soon as their plan comes up, it'll feel like you know the world. You're giving them their lens to the world. And, oh, okay, yeah, it's made of stone. Okay, we'll do something else other than burn it down.
Yeah.
The longer you wait, the more it feels like an ass pull at the last minute.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's just sort of in the same sense that, like, if you have a map that's, in terms of informing the players of what their characters would know, it's sort of in the same sense that if you have a map and you've drawn it, and, like, the PC like starts to move their miniature over into an area, and you tell them, like, well, that's where you just we're gonna move your miniature into. That's actually a 20-foot drop. You're not. Their character's gonna know that, like, they would be walking off a cliff. So just making sure that they know what their character would know, because it definitely doesn't feel great if you're like, well, I wouldn't have stepped off a 20-foot cliff. I just didn't read it correctly on the map.
And you're like, haha, in our game, every time you move your miniature, that happens. So you walked off a 20-foot cliff for no reason.
Okay, yeah. I mean, this is a little bit of a straw man example, but...
Yeah, I feel like that's not even improvising. That's just, like, not being the worst GM.
Well, I'm just trying to make an analogy that, to me, I see not telling the players that their characters would obviously see the building is made of stone. It's kind of analogous to not telling the players that their characters are about to, like, walk off a cliff if they step into a certain square on the battle map. It's just, like, making sure that the assumptions that the players have about the world match the assumptions that you have about the world. And that also helps with the more the players understand where you're coming from with the world too, the less likely they are to come up with something that's just, like, absolutely completely off the wall in a way that wouldn't work.
So we're going to review our number one tip for GMing that we just given, which is don't be the worst GM.
Yes.
All right.
Yay.
Yay, don't be the worst GM. And also tell your players things that they should know. Mm-hmm. And that just helps with improvising overall, because it makes it breathes life into your improvisation if you give details about the world. Even if you had to make that detail up. Like, we're talking all this time about you knew the building was made of stone and it was in the adventure, but if it is a homebrew, maybe you didn't know it was made of stone. But if you tell them right away, oh yeah, it's a solid stone building, a lot of the buildings in this district are made of stone, that is a thing you can do to improvise as well. So Statler says it's okay to be the second to worst GM, just not the worst. Yeah, it's like the bear. You only have to be able to outrun the worst GM.
What do you have against halflings in full play?
I'm just saying, if you can outrun the worst GM, then the angry mob of players will have someone to catch.
Fair enough.
All right. So, in general, I would say that my style of GMing overall is more improvisational. As you guys might know from last Saturday, when I told you guys I was going to be starting a War for the Crown session that I hadn't not really prepared for in second edition right after the stream. Today's session, actually, we have a gap of a few hours after the stream, so I actually might have time to, like, look at the adventure and figure out what's
Well, you do read the adventure in advance, like, when you first start
I read it at some point in the past, but you guys are assaulting a one of the most fortified fortresses in all of Taldor today, and I really should know what the anything about it other than the very basics of what their defense plans are.
You'll figure it out. You always do.
So, in general, the best way to the best way to be ready to improvise is to be generally knowledgeable about what you're improvising about. So, if you have some basic ideas. So Statler is asking what level that campaign with the fortress is at. They're level 12.
12 now, I think.
But the fortress has a variety of useful precautions, such as what was it in the
anti-invisibility?
So yeah, I mean, I don't want to spoil the AP, but your characters can figure this out before you assault the fortress in the AP. And I haven't said which one it is, although you know what I'm running, you know what it is. But it has it is protected against teleportation and divinations. And then it doesn't stop invisibility from happening, but if anything invisible crosses the threshold into the fortress, it sort of pings everyone where the invisible person entered.
That's a warning system I don't think I've ever seen before, but
that's a pretty unique one.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I mean, Kadira and Dowler have been exchanging this fortress multiple times and trying to build more and more defenses into it to prevent that from happening.
And I think this is another really good example of. And this isn't technically an improvised defense, but in terms of high level, when we're talking about high level play before having certain wards and protections, since this is not a common ward or protection, this is the kind of thing that would have felt unfair if it was just sort of like a, oh yeah, and by the way, they had this and I didn't tell you and there's no way to find out in advance. But because the adventure has a way to find out about that, then we had a way to find out about that advance. We can all go in knowing that that's a thing and prepare for it.
Yep. Whereas everyone in my group assumed it was going to be protected from divinations and teleportations.
Yeah.
Because why would you not build a fortress that is protected from that? Since clearly some of them are. Statler's asking, is it updated to 2nd edition too? That must require some prep time. So it is updated to 2nd edition, and that's one reason I need less prep time by a significant amount. Because my group, 1st edition has a very wide, very, 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 very wide gulf of possible numbers and values and optimization that characters can have. Like, I'll put my hands up and down, but the width of the difference between my hands is way not enough to describe the actual difference between an optimized character in 1st edition and an unoptimized character. Like, I love 1st edition, and I enjoy building optimized characters, but it's just, the game is actually not capable of dealing with the amount that people are optimized or not optimized. It just hopes they get into this middle area that almost nobody does. And so for my 1st edition games, I would spend hours not preparing necessarily because I improvise a lot, but building stat blocks for really optimized opponents for my really optimized group. And converting to 2nd edition is actually takes like a 10th of the time that staying in 1st edition but using an AP for my players actually takes. So I actually save time from that. So David Nielsen asked if unseen servants count for breaking invisibility.
I'll ask that you not
I'm not
answer
gonna
that
answer
right
that
now because I'm about to play this
Linda
and
doesn't know.
We know that there's something. We don't know exactly how it works, so I would rather go in not knowing how it works and then be able to sort of experiment with that. But we could certainly talk about that at a later date.
So Statler asked if all the characters had 2nd edition classes. Well, we started playing it in 2nd edition. My playtest group are all under playtester NDAs from Starfinder, the very limited playtest. In fact, the player of our wizard, who I mentioned our wizard before in previous streams, provided reams and reams of feedback on Starfinder, like just a huge volume, and was responsible for a lot of good changes that made it into Starfinder. So, now, did they have to keep updating constantly for all of the updates, including updates that were past update 1.6? Oh, yes.
Every session.
Pretty much every session,
we had updates
some kind of major thing was different, even after update 1.6. But, we've been playing War for the Crown, really since the was it since the playtest?
Yeah.
Or it was not. It was a little after the playtest because the playtest took up too much of my time. But it's kind of right after the playtest ended, and we're now about to finish part 4.
But updating it did take time. But like I did also enjoy the process of updating it because almost every change that was made in the updates was something for the better. So, and in my opinion, I liked almost every change.
Well, I mean, you pretty much asked for that dwarf lore feat that was spoiled in one of the 100 spoilers.
Yeah, I did.
For your dwarf fighter. And then I added it into the feats. But going back to improvising, like, I'm probably going to have to improvise a lot in what I'm about to do, because even in the adventure, it's just like they stat up a fortress, and then it says, yeah, the PCs probably don't want to take on this entire fortress from the front, because they are ready for a Kadirian onslaught of an actual army of Kadirans, and they have a legitimate plan for being sortied, and so the PCs could try a variety of methods.
And you don't know what we're going to try.
I have no idea what they're going to do.
We're going to have to decide that at the beginning of the session.
They have not even given me like advanced warning of what the plan might be.
Now
So
here we get into another useful thing. If you're listening in as your players discuss aloud the kinds of things that they're planning to do.
mm-hmm.
Very useful to have that sort of feedback. Also, listening in as they speculate about how things, what defenses there might be, or what enemies there might be, or what they expect to see.
Listening in is it's not like some players who are very untrusting of GMs are like, don't listen, this is secret and your characters don't know. But listening in is important, particularly because you can chime in to their plans with things that their characters would have seen or known that you haven't told them yet. um, just like if they insist on going away somewhere and they come back and they're like, all right, we spent 2 hours and we're doing the plan, the first step is we burn down the building, and then you're like, but it's made of stone.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were listening and they're like, okay, what are we gonna do? Okay, well, we should start by burning the building. And you say, hold on, it's made of stone. Yeah. In the middle of their plans, they don't spend 2 hours.
Yeah, and then you
something.
can also do what I was saying before, prompting them with knowledge checks. You can also use sort of if it's something their characters would definitely know. If it's something that you can tell them. If it's something that like they have been told once, but maybe they don't remember. Maybe their characters don't remember. Sometimes I'll do like an intelligence or a wisdom check or something like that too. So that I'm not just like being like, oh well, you would know this. If it's something that maybe maybe their character would have forgotten too, but just so that it's like, okay, you succeeded at your intelligence or wisdom check, you remember this thing that we heard before. Because I think it's important to remember with the flow of information that what a player remembers after 2 weeks of life and everything else is not going to be as much as what the character would remember when it's like literally some desperate struggle that they are doing and it is their life. So keeping in mind that difference and being generous to the players and providing information is really good.
Hita Owin asks, how does Anisha prepare for the crazy special ops teams like high level adventurers? Do you hire other adventurers, cut a contract with outsiders to contingently call them in? Could be a nightmare for any installation. I agree. Mm-hmm. The only reason this installation even really might have a chance is because of the fact that it has basically and they've scouted out, they know about some of the people here. It has the commander of the fortress is an even higher level adventurer and badass general. There's a powerful diviner who's about as powerful as the PCs who is in there, and her divinations still work on the fortress even though a lot of outside divinations have been blocked, and is keeping track of things, and also is a wizard, which always is good to have. There's this like sort of super hardcore mean Abadar guy who's the head of an Abadar sect that is basically their divine caster, and that it has a whole sect of his people that are based out of that fortress. And that's just the three that they know about. That there's more. They just have people who are as badass or more badass than the PCs who are working at this fortress. If it was a fortress that was just all low level guards, there's not much you can do, even if you have good magical precaution.
But I think in part, is this sort of the question of if a place has something worth protecting that high level characters would actually care about. Because like a lot of these like basic standard fortresses, like okay, you can beat up the basic guards and get a few hundred gold pieces, but then what is the national government going to think about that? And if you're a power, I mean, nations themselves have access to higher resources that they'll use to protect key value things like their treasuries, and they have their forces of their military and things like that. So it's a combination of, if it's a high value target, then the nation may have things exactly like you were saying, having some outsiders there. Maybe they hire the Red Mantis assassins to go after the PCs if the PCs are being troublesome enough. Maybe they have powerful guards or people who specifically, like, a diviner who might try to track the PCs down and cause them trouble. Or maybe, if the PCs are going against a nation, this is where you would really start to get in with the social factors, the intrigue factors, because not every cause and effect is all about punching things in the face. Maybe after doing this, like, the PCs find that merchants don't want to trade with them anymore because they have caused this sort of trouble. Or maybe they find that there's forces of guards that are trying to arrest them in the middle of the night, or other things like that. So
Also, one thing that Linda did in the Linda's campaign's Kingmaker,
Mm-hmm.
we assaulted a palace of someone who knew that we might do it and that we had superior divination and teleportation abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't there. His body double had been ruling in his stead, which was totally not in the adventure path normally.
Mm-hmm.
But he had left a body double and it was in contact with that body double, and he just made sure he was not in the building. So no matter what we did, no matter what our plan
Mm-hmm.
was,
He wasn't in the
he wasn't
building, and
going to
his
be
greatest treasures also weren't in the
there. They
building.
were
He
not in
kept
the
them on him
building.
because he's like, okay, you know what? I know that I have enemies that have high level divider and all sorts of stuff, and they're going to come after me sometime. They've made this very clear, so I'm going to protect myself.
He was mind blanked and not there.
Yes.
Now, we eventually caught him just because he himself could not cast mind blank, so we took out all the people that we knew about that could give him mind blank, except for a local coven of hags, and then staked the coven of hags. And he went to the coven to get
Yeah,
mind
so
blank.
this is an example of the players. The players then were well informed. They were like, okay, well, where is he getting the spell from? And everything all fit together because I was thinking like, okay, well, if he loses these resources, this is what he's going to have to do. And so by virtue of making it all fit together with the world and making sure the players had access to that information, we were able to sort of improvise a solution that would then work out.
I mean, he still made the wizard collapse into like a puddle of goo because of Numerian tech.
Yeah, that happened.
In
Yeah.
an anti-magic field.
Um,
But the point of the matter was that improvising also has something to do with that high level play episode. So go watch it if you haven't already.
Mm-hmm.
And the intrigue episode with measures and countermeasures, because measures have countermeasures, and everything that the PCs do in the game is something that the NPCs, the monsters, could have done. Did they do that in the published adventure? They did not, probably, if we're assuming that your PCs did something very creative, or just were you're playing Pathfinder First Edition and have like plus 30 higher in all of their statistics than the NPCs.
And this also could be an example. Let's say that I hadn't thought about that Coven of Hags as being the thing and conveyed that information to you and things like that. But then the PCs were like, oh well, where is he getting this mind blank from? Like maybe he's found a Coven of Hags or something. And I had like some answer where it was just like, oh, he's just found another high level wizard. Well, Coven of Hags would sound much cooler. So then in that case,
it's the River Kingdom.
It's the River Kingdom. It's much cooler and more fitting. So let's say that my answer had been wizard. And then at that point, I could say, okay, this sounds cooler. So let's make what that player just speculated out loud correct, because that's going to make for a more fun game and be more satisfying for them. So then I would then delete out that wizard that I had and invent a Coven of Hags that they could then go after. And then I would say, well, so the thing I would say first is, well, have them roll a knowledge check. And then while they're like, oh, that's kind of cool, I'm quickly spinning up in my head like, okay, what kind of things can I say about this Coven of Hags? And then I say some things about this Coven of Hags. And I know, hey, they're not necessarily going to be able to track down this Coven of Hags right now. It's probably going to take them some time. But then I can make a note in my GM notes that I said this because I was not expecting for this, and I can make sure that everything that I said here is accurate. Then I can go from there. I guess this is getting into another topic of like keeping, particularly when you're improvising, keeping track of the notes of what you're doing and making sure you're not painting yourself into a corner. Because until and unless you have exactly and specifically told the PCs how something works, it's not set in stone. Just because you as the GM think something works that way, it doesn't have to work that way until the players know it's not the concrete truth.
Speaking of set in stone, we were talking about that when we were talking about the stone building. You could theoretically decide that it is after they said that they were going to light it on fire.
I'm not thinking of any examples right now, but I know that that's definitely something that I've done where the player says something and then I change that, and to me, I guess it just becomes so much the story in my head at that stage that I know that I've drawn a lot of inspiration from my players, but it's hard to come up with a specific example at the time.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people give that advice, and I know I've done it, but I can't remember. Like, the example you gave there, you had the Coven as the backup plan.
Yes.
He had a non-backup plan, but we took her out because Linda added an extra character that was one of his supporters who was a mind blank capable sorceress. Mm-hmm. And we took out that sorcerer and tried to interrogate her but we were too good aligned to, even with our divinations, to figure things out.
We can get into the specifics a bit more if we do
But
the Keymaker episode.
yes, we can.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want to go into intimidation for things that we knew that we weren't going to do. And we tried a lot of divinations, we didn't figure it out, but fortunately we guessed right. Now, so we were talking about some aspects of improv, but there were a few other things that we told people we would talk about. So there's all the times when your players come up with something cool, and you take it if it's a cooler idea, or you find a way to work around and pivot to the players doing something unusual. One thing, let's actually do the last one of players doing something weird before we move on to the one about characters dying. Cause
I have another thing to talk about.
Oh yeah, but we didn't quite get to what if they don't just have a weird way to do the thing, but we go back to Statler's players just don't want to do your plot at all. Linda, what would you advise if I was like, okay, well, you're going to do this fortress, and instead of like coming up with a creative way to do the fortress, like, no, we're leaving and we're going to Qadira.
Okay, so you're leaving and going to Qadira. So first of all,
screw this war for the crown. We're going to help Qadira conquer Taldor.
Okay, so first of all, I would, if the players do such a giant pivot, I would want to make sure that they sort of they're understanding like what's naturally going to happen for this. So like they're no longer proceeding with their main quest. So presumably if they're not there to make the main quest happen, since they're the PCs, the main quest is dependent upon them. Make sure they understand that, their initial main quest is going to fail. And in this case, they've decided they want to go to Qadira and they want to help Qadira conquer Taldor. So they're probably on board with that, but just make sure that they understand it. Okay, so this is a fortress, and this is on the border between Qadira and Taldor. So they're probably going to have to conquer this fortress, but just come into it from another direction. So the first challenge that they're going to have is Taldans. They're going to have to convince the Qadirans that they're actually serious and not part of an invasion force.
That might be hard because they were formerly spies for Taldor.
Because they're formerly spies for Taldor, and they may have certain proof that they are spies for Taldor, and the Qadirans are going to be very suspicious of them. So you're going to want to ask them, like, okay, so you want to help the Qadiran forces. So you're probably then going to be you'll probably look up like so first of all, at this point, players are very understanding if when they throw you a giant monkey wrench, if you say like, all right, let's take a 10-minute break while I figure this stuff out. So I would say like, okay, well, I'm looking at this capital of Qadira. If I didn't already know it was Kathir. Okay, what do I know about the capital of Qadira? I might pull up Pathfinder Wiki to see what I know about this capital and several of the most influential people. And then I might be going, okay, so then the PCs are going to be trying to get a meeting with these influential people, and then you go into these sorts of things. So I guess in terms of tools that you draw from, when it comes to stat blocks and things like that, if you're going to be going into combats and you weren't expecting combat, I find the codex volumes are super useful. NPC codex, villain codex, the stats in the back of the game mastery guide. Taking those and then maybe making minor tweaks to make them work for what you're doing if you're finding yourself in an unexpected combat, or any number of the monsters in the bestiary. The charts in the back that have like, monsters by CR and things like that, you can read through that list and pick some things out. And if it's a social thing you're improvising, I find that improvising direct roleplay is often easier than improvising mechanics, although we did talk in the intrigue episode about sort of how to quickly come up with stat blocks for sort of influence systems and things like that.
Right.
But I think one thing to keep in mind with a dramatic pivot is that you're not the only one who's going to need time to think about what you're doing. The players, as they start to realize the complexities of, say, the fact that they've decided to switch to this nation, they're gonna. So then you're gonna be like, okay, so how are you gonna convince them that you, as former Taldan spies, are people they should trust? Now the players are gonna have a conversation about the way that they're gonna do that. And you listen to them to figure out where they're going to go. And if they're like, oh, well, we should talk to these government officials. Oh, we should do this thing. So then if they seem to be going in a plan where they're going to talk to the government officials, this is where you like say, okay, I'm going to give some names to the government officials that they're probably going to find first. And you can spin that out while
Bob all Bob.
No. You're Bob the Guard and Kingmaker. This is an example of bad improv when I flippantly named a guard Bob that the PCs...
He had really low will saves.
Right on there, like, who's the guard with the low will saves? And I'm like, Bob or something. And then, because don't do that, because then, of course, I I guess one of the rules of improvising with GMing is if you give an NPC a ridiculous name that doesn't make sense just because you're like, oh, that's Bob, that's Chad, that's Barry or whatever, because you don't want to be bothered in some random NPC. There's a 100% chance that NPC is going to become 10 times more important and stick around to the end of the campaign, and you'll wish you gave them a real name.
I think all Bob the Guards are like that.
Yep.
Here's an example of so I was playing in a
having a list of names.
Yeah. Having a list of names is very useful for improv if you just have it on hand ahead of time. And I know you have one, you would just check off each one as you used it. But there's another Bob the Guard improv story that's maybe a story of failed improv / somehow succeeding improv. I was playing in a Shackled City game. This was a while back when Shackled City was a new thing, the very first adventure path ever. And the GM was a completely new GM who was trying to figure out how to handle getting the party together. And my character had come from another city to the city of Cauldron, which is where the AP takes place. And I just wanted to go to this one, like, Blue Crater Academy or something like that. It was called something very similar because I was an archivist. And that's all I wanted to do. So I came in through the front entrance from the city I had come from, and he told me which direction it was. And literally, had I turned left and walked a block, the Blue Crater Academy was right there. That is where I wanted to go. He decided to have Bob the Guard, who is also named Bob the Guard, the friendly front gate guard, lead me through Cauldron. If you may or may not know, was like, it was around a caldera of a volcano, so it was exactly a circle. If I had gone clockwise, one block, I would have been there. He had me go counterclockwise and into this weird back alley, because the PCs all meet when they go into this back alley and get attacked by a thieves guild. Which we later found out that the thieves guild was made 80 to 90% of disaffected guards who weren't paid enough. So my character said, Bob the Guard is obviously a member or informant for this thieves guild. He gave me the world's worst advice for getting to a building that sent me into this ambush back alley. And there's no way anyone who lived in this city would have ever given someone those directions if they weren't trying to lead them into an ambush, let alone that I did get led into an ambush. And so, just continually, because the guard captain hired us multiple times, I was like, you need to find Bob the Guard. He's a member of the Thieves Guild. And, see? Yeah, Stadler agrees. Bob screwed me over. And the funny thing was the GM told me out of character, like, no, I just made up Bob the Guard. I was like, but in the world, he has to be a member of this Thieves Guild. There's no reason he would have told me to go there.
And this would be a point, like, as the GM, where, like, you know, you could easily decide, like, Bob is a member of the Thieves Guild. Maybe now that the players pointed this out, maybe you came up with it just because you're like, I need them to go over here, so guard tells you to go over there. Because that's the thing that happens sometimes, too, with improv, is, like, you may not have time to think through every possible consequence of everything that he set you in an inefficient route, but then later on, you can come up with, and the player can come up with, oh, like, he must be a member of the Thieves Guild, and then you can say, okay, yes, let's make him a member of the Thieves Guild. And then let's say, okay, maybe he's like a lieutenant in the Thieves Guild. And then let's, like, be prepared to have stats for Bob. David says, even worse, Bob just has a really bad sense of direction.
I think that
could be hilarious, though.
I think legitly the GM did not think about the fact that I could have gone the other way and was just trying to get us all together. I mean, I know that.
Yeah.
But it would have been great because that Thieves Guild was an early adversary. And every time we met that guard captain, I think his name was Skeldrin or something, we called him Skeletor.
Yeah.
He's like, Skeletor, you need to find Bob the Guard.
And then, like David was saying, if Bob just has a really bad sense of direction, he always goes in this inefficient way, then there may be this thing where, like, you're putting all this time and energy into investing Bob the Guard, and then the guard captain trusts you less because you're, like, keep doing this red herring. Or Statler says Bob is an undercover agent infiltrating the Thieves Guild. So maybe you're going to expose Bob's cover if you keep doing all this stuff.
So my character in that game was a conspiracy theorist. I was supposed to be very kind of untrustworthy in that way. I was trying to do that. I would just make things up. Like, the first time the guard captain called us, it's Shackled City. It's a long time in the past, so I'm okay spoiling it. There was just this like, written in blood on the wall by a goblin. There was a thing that says, like, Drakthar lives. And so I told the guard captain that we were being attacked by vampires and that he had to buy us magical silver, and he refused and said there was not enough evidence, and I tried to convince him, and I bought silver and magic weapon scrolls for the party, And then there was a vampire that we almost died against without those things, and the captain had to apologize that the problem with my conspiracy theories were too accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So I wound up being like, every time I made something up, I was like, "There's a guy named Lord Orbius. He's probably a beholder," and like it always was right. So with Bob the Guard, though, it turns out it wasn't right,
Yeah.
because that was just an
And
improvised
that was actually
character.
like probably in the game, but like as your if I was your GM there, I could have decided like, you know, which of your conspiracy theory. If I had a conspiracy theorist player, like I would want some of your conspiracy theories to be right, and I'd want some of your conspiracy theories to be hilariously wrong in a way that drove the plot.
Well, my main conspiracy theory, because this had Forgotten Realms deities, was that Lathander was the god of the sun, was just a attempt at PR by Amonitor, a previous god of the sun, who had incorrectly not predicted an apocalypse, and wanted to just sort of start over with a new name, and became Lathander, the god of new beginnings, which was an in-world conspiracy theory that had very little credence. And then in 4E it became true. So the
Yeah.
one that wasn't true when I was playing it in 3rd edition turned out to be true.
David said, to be fair, conspiracies do occur, especially in D&D and Pathfinder. Yeah, so it's sort of it can be fun. That's a way to sort of lean into the tropes of the game. Like, yes, you know, there's going to be conspiracies and plots that are convoluted, and even more so by far than in real life. But then you can say, oh yes, well, some of these are going to be true and some of them aren't going to be true. And David also
Right.
said earlier, like, more normal names that you would see on like actual people are better in modern settings. I guess it would be in a modern setting, the equivalent of that would be like, you know, naming a character Fumbus in a modern setting would get people like, oh, that's Fumbus, and now we're gonna super pay attention to it. So I would say more broadly, it's gonna stick in players' minds if you have names that are not fitting to the setting.
And it looks like the Red Hang Thieves Guild was suggested by Statler, and Kate named someone Red who's going to die, probably because of red shirt.
Was their shirt red?
Yep, poor red big shirt.
Poor red big
So
shirt.
speaking of people who die, one of the other things you're going to have to be able to improvise around in an RPG that is not true of like other storytelling media is when the dice do something crazy. Because your players might do something you don't expect, but the dice might just suddenly cause a PC, an allied NPC, a bad guy, or just something weird might happen.
Mm-hmm.
They might be killed. They might be like hit by a rod of wonder with something that you didn't expect, sent to another plane. And you need to be able to improvise for that, because that
you might
PC
decide to
might
put in a deck of many things. Although, to be honest, if you decide to put in a deck of many things, you're basically just being like, I feel like flexing my improv chops today.
like, take that Skull and Shackles example. Our crazy captain who thought she was invincible, and kind of was, because she was a swashbuckler and she considered to be cheating to use saving throws, and attack rolls cannot beat a swashbuckler. Even that Blood Razor you built that was like 4 levels higher that almost won.
Yes.
That you custom built to be really optimized could not beat a swashbuckler with attack rolls.
Yeah, I mean, I sorted it out, and it
Yep.
looked like it was going to be a really tough fight, and you may have to bite the bullet, swallow your pride, and allow one of the other PCs to help you deal with
Rin
an enemy
will never
that's
allow
4
another
levels
PC
higher.
to deal with an enemy 4 levels higher. But yeah, Hito Win mentions Shackled City has an actual assassination against the PCs, which is unusual. Yeah, I think there's one in one of the Pathfinder modules as well. They're kind of uncommon. I know James Jacobs doesn't like them. Maybe it's after the Shackled City that he got feedback about it.
Mm-hmm.
So they come up sometimes, but
And
not
then
others.
you venture with Red Mantis Assassins coming into it.
He actually, despite loving the Red Mantis, he doesn't like PC assassinations.
Yeah.
Or attacks during camping.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were talking with him about the section about watch order, and he was saying, well, we could skip that because nobody ever like attacks PCs during the watch, right?
Like
we
that.
shouldn't. It's like, I know at least a few adventures that we put out where that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly PCs dying is something that you have to be able to deal with. And so, anyway, I was talking about the swashbuckler.
Mm-hmm.
Now, imagine if she died, though. Like, she was the plot device that was keeping the entire crew together and that was causing us to actually follow the plot.
Mm-hmm.
If she had just died, she would have, like, died with a grin on her lips and, like, Besmara, I guess we weren't entertaining enough or something like that. But the rest of the crew would have possibly splintered, and they definitely would not have just kept following arbitrary minor thing. Oh, a message in a bottle. Bespara must have sent that. We should go immediately and do that.
So I guess there's two sort of branches when it comes to character death. There's character death, and access to resurrection magic is like easy and natural, and they have enough to pay for it. Because in that case, it's honestly just more of a speed bump. So
Right.
for this conversation, are we assuming that the character died and either the player didn't want to bring that character, or resurrection magic wasn't easily or readily available, or other things like that?
I don't know. I'll ask you because you were the one who added character death onto the description of this, so I figured you had a plan.
Yeah, well, I guess, yeah, no, but I mean, I guess there's sort of the two different things, like I was saying, I'm sort of thinking about it more from the perspective of, okay, what happens when first PCs die and they don't have sort of that easy band-aid, they don't have the resources, they don't have the way to afford things. Or also the second one would be what happens when NPCs die and you did not expect them to do that because they were a linchpin of your game. So I wanted to talk about the PC death first, and what you can do if what you can do if like PCs die and you didn't expect that to happen. I guess one of the things is, even if the PCs don't technically have all the money on them to be able to afford the resurrection style magic, you can certainly come up with ways for them to access it too, at a cost. So maybe they get like some kind of wealthy patron who will help them in this, but then the patron has other things that the PCs need to do in exchange, for example.
Yep. Another thing that can help, as long as it doesn't seem like an ass pull, is divine interventions for people who are really tied in with the deity. Like if Vespara intervened for Ren, that would be something she might do. Pathfinder First Edition had like a faction guidebook where it's like generic faction, your deity, and you could gain points, and you would see that you had enough that the deity might intervene, so it doesn't feel like the GM just saying, "Oh well, screw it. Anytime you're in trouble, the deity's gonna do something."
Yeah.
And I used that in Rise of the Runelords and gave an intervention once for the Cleric of Urgathoa, especially since she was about to die from a very like Urgathoa related thing.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to use divine intervention, it's important to have some way of making that clear to the players that this isn't just something that's going to constantly happen.
Yep.
But there's going to be some sort of check and balance. Like maybe you get that intervention, but now that you've had that intervention, the deity expects you to do some grand quest for them.
Right. And
it makes it clear that they're not going to be doing that all the time.
Yes, for sure. And in divine intervention can work, but obviously you don't want to overuse divine intervention as a plot, or like I said, it will just seem like anything is going to happen. Another way that you can deal with this, to be perfectly honest with you, is play a game system where you don't have to worry about that as much. So in my Pathfinder First Edition games, even Jade Regent, where their group had a ton of healing, there were still some deaths. And in Rise of the Runelords, I had like over 16 characters die, because Pathfinder First Edition's death and dying system is really, really bad at not causing people to die. The only reason more people don't die is, in Pathfinder First Edition, is I feel like a lot of the times people don't up the challenge level of the monsters so that PCs steamroll and no one ever goes unconscious. But past a certain point, if you go unconscious in Pathfinder First Edition, you probably just died completely. And that was the problem, is you guys had challenging fights, you always won, but characters died sometimes because in Pathfinder First Edition's death and dying system, if you get anywhere close, you're dead. And if you play a game that's not like that, a lot of like sort of more story games, certainly Pathfinder Second Edition's dying system is far friendlier. It doesn't have like this window of negative hit points that's this small. And I haven't killed any of you in War for the Crown, not even once. You rarely even had to use hero points to avert a death, except that one time that the party decided that they were going to chop an ooze into like over 16 oozes that was surrounding you.
Hey, you gave me a hero point for doing that.
I gave you a hero point for agreeing to let them do that when the alchemist was like, they split with electricity? I can throw 3 electric bombs per round. Imagine how many times I could split them. And then you could fireball them, wizard, with Linda in the center.
This was not a good plan for the poor fighter.
It actually would have, if they had like 4 more splits, it would have been okay. Because the problem was that after that fireball, there were too many of the oozes still barely alive with a few hit points, and then they attacked Linda.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, David said it was almost a good plan. Yes, it was almost a good plan, and I was willing to take that. I was willing. My character was willing to take that risk because she was wanting to prove her own heroism, and I got a hero point for it. So I used that hero point to not totally die when that happened.
And nowadays, they also give you resist energy fire. So if you had just taken a little less damage from the fireball, maybe that would have been good too.
So I guess we talked a bit about like ways to bring back the character if they die. What if the character? But that's not always going to work.
Yeah,
Maybe
what
the
if the
player doesn't
character's
want.
just gone?
What if the character's just gone? So in that case, you're generally going to be working with that player to make another character for the next session, a character that can. Sometimes you're going to make sure that they like sort of complement the party dynamic and they have a good way to enter into the fight. For that session, if there's any NPC allies or other folk that are around, or even like somebody's animal companion or something that player can control, so that they're still actively participating in the game, it's a good idea to hand that over to them. And then when you're creating for the next session, you can really work with the player to find a cool way for their character to enter. I mean, I guess one of the sort of stereotypical ones is if the PCs are assaulting some kind of fortress base or whatever, that PC had been taken captive because they had been trying to do like a single-handed charge and raid against these people. So they already are set up to have the same enemy as the PCs have and to have a reason to ally with them. And the PCs, by virtue of seeing that they were a captive, know for a fact that they are not working with their enemies and they can come together in that way if you're in the middle of a dungeon. They could also be like, let's say that the PCs then see that one of their characters died, so they want to retreat to town and regroup a bit. And then, maybe the other PC that's coming in, the new PC is like a traveler who's arrived in the town, and they're going to try to help them with this because, again, they have sort of the same enemy. So making sure that they've got that common ground. And then what you can do is you can have some time. It's good to, when you have a new character come in, to take some time dedicating in that first session with them to have them get to know the new PC and to build at least enough trust and rapport to move forward with them.
And another way you can deal with it that we did in Linda's first campaign is to be ready. We turned out not to need to be ready, but after seeing just how much in Pathfinder, just if you're even remotely close to losing a fight, probably someone might die, because unless you've got lots of Breath of Life, the death and dying system is just, you're dead. We had like a backup character who, we had at least one extra backup character who was like a Team Bomb Paladin. Plus, in Council of Thieves, you have like this backup organization that's full of backup characters that were sort of like disciples of the PCs. So we all had people that we were like grooming that could be replacement characters, and then nobody's character died because we were pretty badass, and we were very lucky. Because I don't even feel like we had, and we also had paladins.
You had paladins, and you were going against devils. Let's be real.
Yeah, we had paladins going against devils, and it was Council of Thieves. So for a while, I think they got that double damage on all of the attacks, and not the first one.
That's right.
So because that was one of the errata that some people don't remember from the first printing of the core rulebook. Waka waka waka. But we did have backup characters who would have been seamless to add into the adventure at any time.
And I guess another thing to talk about when you're dealing with characters leaving via death is what that can do to party treasure.
Yep.
Because the game sort of assumes that you have an appropriate amount of treasure for your PCs, but if you bring in another fully treasured PC, then that could really disrupt things. So if the player coming in is bringing a character who's very similar in build, then they may be able to like take some of the dead PC's treasure. But it's something to work with the players about. Like they could choose to bury that PC with their gear, and if they don't, if it's a different character, they need to come in with the new character needs to come in with full gear because they're not really going to be able to like quickly repossess some of the stuff from their original character. Then you're probably going to need to reduce treasure in upcoming adventures just to balance that out.
Yep. Now, if you've had some people get raised and some people go away, sometimes that'll cancel itself out. But
Yeah, because
that's
raising
not
does cost money. Yeah.
it's not a good cancellation. It's more of a you were lucky cancellation.
Yeah, and it can be worth it occasionally to take a look at sort of what the PCs have versus the wealth by level tables. And now, if you're playing like a typical adventure path stuff like that, the PCs are going to be over. If they're doing well in the adventure path, they're going to be substantially over. But if you have a point where like you look at it and the PCs have like twice the wealth by level they're supposed to have, then that can be a point to sort of reassess and maybe notch things down a little
And
bit.
Kate has the belongs go to the PC's next of kin. We've definitely done that sometimes
Yes.
before. It also
That's a good strategy.
it depends on what the party charter is.
Yeah.
Sometimes you could have a party with a pretty messed up charter.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, in the Rise of the Rune Lords game I ran, the party charter did not do that. It also said that, for instance, cohorts don't get any treasure.
Mm-hmm.
This was, or their treasure has to come out of the share for the PC, and also dead PCs don't get any treasure.
That was a screwed up charter, but we all it was in the personality of our characters, and we as players all agreed that was.
Well, a
going
lot
to
of
be
characters had died,
Yeah.
and your character is the only original member from the first 5 members that. Or there were 2 who survived by retiring.
Yeah.
But
yeah, my PC was an asshole.
But that was the charter. So one of the paladins whose player had left before this point, it was being played by a guest player who came in with his own character after part 4, died in a massive bloodbath at the end of part 4, where he was turned into gold and then shattered into thousands of coins. And this character, like, he had a cohort who was like a bard who was just the only job of that bard was to talk about how this paladin was the best and spread a gospel of that paladin who, while he ostensibly worshipped Iomade, really clearly wanted Iomade to worship him and wanted to become like a god by the test of the Starstone and spread his acts. And so that that bard was like, can I have some money to raise back the paladin? And they had just gotten, most of the time, even though their charter was actually really terrible, the PCs were just nice and they didn't follow the charter. But they got an evil Iraseni witch who joined the group like right before this and had read the charter with very happy glee. It was like, it says here that you don't get anything. And she's like, but what about his body? It turned into coins. So he flipped over. He was like, well, his body turned into about 1/5 of the number of coins in this treasure hoard. So here's 5 coins. On average, you have his body.
Yep.
Yep.
That totally didn't come back to bite the
You
party
mean
in the ass of the
when
future.
he turned into an anti-paladin made of gold?
When he turned into an anti-paladin made of gold and he fought against us because we were terrible people.
Yep.
Yep.
Also, your party with a witch and Linda's character might cheat all of the rest of the PCs that had temporarily joined the group and NPCs that they hired by just claiming that a giant Thessalonian library and an artifact cauldron aren't worth any value because their value is dash.
Now, to be clear, it's very important when you're doing stuff like this. The difference between character knowledge and player knowledge, because you don't want to be in a situation where, we needed to make sure that all the players were okay with the fact that we were doing.
Well, they cheated exactly 0 players.
Yeah, exactly. So we cheated exactly 0 players. We cheated NPCs.
Yes, they cheated only NPCs. And they were like, here, you can have extra gold. We'll just take these stupid books and this weird cauldron. That's not very valuable.
But I guess it comes back to we weren't messing over the other PCs. And anytime that you're gonna have a situation where like PCs are treating each other unfairly, it's important that all the players understand and they're interested and they're on board with this idea.
That's right. So we talked a little bit about if characters die, what to do, how you could improvise the story moving on with a different character. Or we talked about improvising gold. But what about the story? What if that character has become a crucial part of the story that you're telling at that point in time?
So, if that character has become a crucial part of the story you're telling at one point in time, I guess you look at what is the role. First of all, what is the role that character is filling, and can that player's new character fill a similar linchpin role, or can another character step up to that? And if not, the story may well go into a different direction at that point. And that's the point when it would be really good to have a conversation with your players about, How are they going to react to this permanent death of a character? I mean, this permanent death of a character is a momentous situation. What are their goals now? What do they want to pursue?
So I'll give an example of something that actually happened 3 times to me in the same adventure. It is Rise of the Rune Lords. So if you still don't know the beginning of Rise of the Rune Lords at this point, you should mute now, and I will put my finger up like this again when I'm done talking about the thing. Okay, ready? Alright, so, still with us. In Rise of the Rune Lords, at the very beginning, in the first encounter, the noble Aldrin Foxglove gets an obsession with someone. All 3 times I started running Rise of the Rune Lords, that person had left the group or died before the point in time where it actually mattered. So I had to do different things each time, whether I was changing the obsession. The best one I did was when the character died, I changed the obsessive, because he sends obsessive notes, so I changed the obsessive note to another character, and that was a little worse. But then I had him go exhume the body and somehow transmute his undead disease to that person. And then the party had to fight a gassed version of that character who died. And let me tell you, a weird multi-class monk/druid character who didn't have enough point buy, or not point buy, or whatever, to build the stats for that character because he decided to put 16 in charisma, is actually really terrifying after you add the gas template. But okay, I'm going to put my finger back up. You can come back now. You just have to figure out a way to make it go onward, and sometimes it doesn't work as well, sometimes it works even better in certain ways.
And again, that'll be a case where while the players are having that conversation about what they want to do next, trying to have that in the session so that you can listen and you can figure out what they're doing. And I mean, I think it also comes down to, like Mark was saying, that some people maybe we don't want to have the conversations in front of the GM. It's important to build that trust and rapport, and part of the way that you build that rapport is by being fair and making sure that the world is logical and consistent, and the players have a way to find information and understand.
Players should want to have the conversation in front of you because you're more likely to tell them relevant info their characters would know that help them plan than you are to be like, yeah, I'll cancel everything they've thought of.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, whether some of that should be canceled and will be canceled, it doesn't matter if they told you if the plan or not. So let's move on with an anecdote that's based on you're talking about taking a break to another topic we said we would handle, which is, so this is great for if you're running a published AP or writing your own homebrew stuff, anything we said here. What about in organized play, where it says run the scenarios written, but also that you should respect creative solutions that characters have. So
are we gonna talk about Scry Teleport?
David said we had to.
Yes.
The when we even said this topic existed. So I think we have to talk about Fury of the Fiend.
Fury of the Fiend, yes.
We were playing Fury of the Fiend, and my crazy archer character was not at all responsible for this.
Yes.
But we were in 10 to 11, or maybe 7 to 8. Actually, 8 to 9, is it a 5 to 9? I don't know.
You were in some tier where you had teleport.
The point is we had 9th level wizard and a 9th level cleric. So between the two of them, they had scry and teleport. And
the mission, not to go into too many spoilers, the mission involved rescuing an NPC.
So the mission was mostly, right at the beginning they say, hey, we're going to go to some Hell Knight Citadel, and there's we have some researchers that there could be a problem.
Yeah.
But then, one of our faction missions was like, among the researchers, this person you're looking for, here's a description, and her name is Marianne Karn.
Yeah.
So, that was enough to scry on her.
Yes. And I look into the adventure, and there's no reason why she would be protecting the scrying thing.
She is in the room with the final encounter with all the other people we were supposed to find.
So then I look, and either she had some kind of stats or something like that, or I just came up with what a reasonable will save would be for a character for a level, rolled it, she failed.
So then there's another question, which is we need to know the exact layout of the room and the location on Golarion. The problem is, Drendel Dranger, whoever sent us there, did know the correct location of where it was, and that it was underground, and it was the excavation site, which they knew how it was set up.
Yes.
So we had all the information we needed to teleport. We even had a good glimpse of the area, and we knew they were in that room based on the scry. So it was part of a giant excavation site. We wouldn't have known where to teleport without the scry, but with the scry, we were able to tell where it was, how far down it was, and so Linda said,
"Okay, you can do this. Just give me 5 minutes."
"Yep."
So then I spend that 5 minutes looking at the dungeon because I realize what's going to happen is they're going to teleport into the final encounter. They're going to do the final encounter, and then they're because they're not going to have another teleport to get out. They're going to need to leave the dungeon in reverse.
Even if we had a teleport, we needed to get out like 10 researchers.
Yeah, right. You're right. You needed to get out more people. So you were about to need to do the dungeon in reverse. So I'm seeing like all these encounters and how they're working. And what's supposed to be one of the first encounters is this collapsing elevator that this kind of collapsing elevator that you're on that's covered in Morlocks or
like it's working, but the Morlocks are trying to destroy it.
So then I'm thinking about how all these encounters work because that's an encounter because the idea is now this has gone from a situation where you're doing a conversation in the beginning to get permission to access the site, then you're doing these other encounters, and then you're going through to the boss to you start with the boss and now you have an escort mission.
Yep. And let me tell you, 32 Morlocks is maybe not the best encounter design Pathfinder Society has ever made for a high-level group because they're just dead with one chain lightning or something like that. But
they added a whole dynamic of threat to the encounter because now you have the situation where you have all these NPCs. So I think I use like dice or something.
Yeah, when you're playing it backwards and you have to protect these Moog NPCs, suddenly 32 characters that literally can't hit any of the PCs except on a natural 20 might actually do something.
Yeah, so then I'm like, all right, so then they might be attacking so then they attack the captives, or not the captives, they attack the escort mission people first until the PCs do enough damage to draw the aggro. And also the fact that they're there made the elevator a lot more cramped than it was supposed to be, so like PCs were squeezing and there was other stuff going on.
And we did not, instead of convincing the Hell Knights to let us into the elevator, we instead got to convince the Hell Knights that they should shut up and just accept part of the credit for this successful rescue mission.
Yes.
Instead of claiming that the infernal bureaucracy of Cheliax is inefficient.
Yeah, so there was still a social encounter with convincing the Hell Knights, but it was more like, why should we not arrest you right now for breaking into the site? So
fortunately, I was a Hell Knight.
That gave you some good.
Order of the Gate, we're just more efficient than the other orders.
Order of the Gate's done this, yeah. So yeah, exactly, Sally. We're gonna get you out of here. We haven't cleared the way yet. So I was able to still run all the combat encounters and all the social encounters, but they just had new twists on them and stuff like that. So that's an example of. I think that's probably my favorite example of creative solutions because that was the adventure that ran in reverse.
That was
it had a different theme.
The most upended of a Pathfinder Society adventure that I've seen done in a public game.
Yes.
That's definitely true. So, that's a good example. Just even in Pathfinder Society, you still run it as written. That's what would have happened as written if we did that. But it allowed for the creative solution.
And I mean, in general, whenever there's a talk about creative solutions in general with skill checks, even if the scenario doesn't explicitly say, and we do try to call this out in a lot of the investigation things just to remind GMs, but you can have players using different types of skill checks to approach things. It's just important to remember when you're doing that there's sort of a hierarchy of skill checks in terms of like how niche they are. So like you've got your diplomacy and perception at the top, which are like your super common skills, all the way down to like your professions and crafts and things like that. So whenever you're having a creative solution situation, you're generally going to want to be moving down the hierarchy of skills, so the PCs are using rarer skills rather than having them use common skills like using diplomacy or perception for everything. That's not going to be great.
Yeah, like I maybe have a lower tolerance for this because of the fact that maybe I just think of solutions and so I don't think of them as creative, but if I just see someone who has plus 50 to bluff and their solution to every problem is that they're going to use bluff, it's like, no, this is supposed to be a professional librarian check to check the library or an appraise to look for the valuable book. I'm just going to lie to a librarian and make them do it. And that they're just constantly using bluff for everything. To me, that's not actually being very creative. It's being like the minimal amount of creative to try to justify using their one skill so that nobody else in the party can shine. So I usually don't allow that to work that many times in a
Yeah,
row.
so I mean, you can certainly allow it to work once during the scenario, but but if someone's randomly doing that, I generally consider the hierarchy. If there's a relevant like craft or profession or something, I mean, it'll basically always work in my table.
And Kate had a PC use bloodbiography on a dead body in my enemy's enemy. Yep, that's a divination that wasn't in our divination episode. You always get some useful info like, my name's Bob. How did I die? Some murder hobos just killed me and skinned me to learn about my greatest treasure from a treasure map.
Yeah.
If they're casting Create Treasure Map.
And I think that's part of why, that's part of why adventurers have that the background that they do. Even if not all of that can be conveyed to the PCs easily and naturally. Sometimes we're asked like, well, why do you put that background up there? Part of it is to inform like knowing how the NPCs are going to react and what they're going to do, and what their motivations are and where they come from, to help GMs handle these unexpected situations. So that okay, who's their allies, how do they get here, and that helps to flesh them out.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it definitely changes if you know the murderer at that stage.
That's true.
You can do all sorts of interesting things when the PCs have more information than they're expected to have.
Right. So yeah, creative solutions can definitely, and sometimes they bypass encounters. Like you managed to give us all the encounters.
Yeah, and if they bypass encounters, that's the thing with the way that Treasure is written in Pathfinder Society is the idea is that if you bypass an encounter and you do something else and it's not combat, you still get the full treasure and rewards from it. That's very intentional because we don't want to set it up so you always have to fight in order to get the rewards.
But now I'm gonna push on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's assume that somehow Max, with his wizard, had the ability to bring all those researchers out. Should we've got and before we fought the boss encounter that was in the last room that came at us because we couldn't. Let's say he could have just gone in and we warped them all out as that boss was coming out, and we didn't fight anything. And we just, in the briefing, we teleported there and left. We didn't talk to the Hell Knights. That was it.
Well, your mission
Your mission was to get those people. Would you and should you have given us all the rewards, including like boons for like you found this thing that we didn't find? And
no, I would say like
you got the Hell Knights on your side.
Yeah, I mean there is a judgment call if you get into sort of that sort of thing. What I would be doing at that point is I'd be looking into the adventure like. Is there any part of the mission briefing that's about exploring the site or things like that?
Let's say there wasn't.
Well, I can see a few different things here. I could see, for example, having the venture captain be like, "That's amazing, you rescued these people," but we also want to check on some other things with this site to try to send the PCs back to explore the site more, or like trying to come up with reasonable reasons in world where it's like, okay, yeah, you've got them out, you don't have to worry about rescuing them, but try to do this. I mean, another thing too is that as Pathfinders. Explore and report are part of the Pathfinder motto. So if you're just going in blitzing and not observing the situation and just like grabbing the people and getting them out, you're not really doing the explore and report part of the motto. So you can sort of try to edge them back in.
All right, so that one was in a very interesting archaeological site. Let me try to give another example. Suppose that we made a spell somewhere in a player companion that nobody's found yet called like summon named character, and what it did was it teleports a named person to you.
Yes.
And if you know them and you have like a personal belonging, maybe a piece of their body, like hair. And so let's say in the stolen heir, when you have a briefing that just said find this stolen heir, and you go and you find some hair from her hairbrush, and then you summon her, and you don't do any of the investigation, but there's no archaeological site. You don't know that there's a conspiracy with her family that you haven't unraveled or whatever. You just, however much it is she can tell you because she knows who captured her. And that person has obviously run away by the time you would get there anyway because of the fact they lost this.
Well, there's one there's one assumption in this that I need to address.
Okay.
Spell in some player companion that we don't know about. This is why we do additional resources.
Okay.
One of the main reasons is
let's
so
say,
that we can
find
these spells, and if there's something that's going to be seriously...
Let's say it was in a player companion from before you and John were on, and that when the additional resources was mostly just everything.
Okay, so there's a spell There's a spell from the additional resources
that have
from
been allowed
5 years
from
ago that
previous
have been allowed
campaigns.
from previous campaigns.
And
literally,
nobody used it because it just summoned an NPC
literally
to you.
nobody's used it, and
Yes.
it summons an NPC to you, and now it derails the adventure. Well, okay, so there's a point at which, as the GM, like, you can have a conversation with your players, and you can be like, yes, you could technically use this spell and just succeed at this scenario, and I would give you the XP for this things. But is this really like what you guys want to do? Like, don't you want to like actually play this?
My question is that really a creative solution?
No, I would say at that point it's sort of like, okay, guys,
it's a degenerate solution.
That's when you have a conversation with your table about like what people actually want to do, and you can be like, yeah, you know what, that's really interesting. And if you find a spell like that can like just literally win an adventure, please post on paizo.com about it so that we can remove it via the additional resources. We don't want that kind of shenanigans. But yeah, at some point with a published adventure, there is that time for that conversation with the players about like, making sure that that comes back to table dynamics and making sure that the adventure is fun for everyone. Because one person casting one spell to win the entire adventure and everyone packs up their books and goes home instead of actually getting to play is not a good solution.
All right. Yeah, I wanted to drill down on that in terms of improvising, because there is a point, yes, I know where it's not a creative solution anymore.
Yes.
Statler is wondering how the player would happen to have that spell that no one ever used. Well, I imagine that if there was a spell that did that on a willing target only and brought them to you, like, it could be popular for bringing PCs into other locations. There even are things that do that. Mm-hmm. One of the relics from War for the Crown.
Oh yeah, I guess I forgot one other thing that I would do if a player brought out a spell like that, and I was like, I'd be like, so what source is that from? And I would be checking the additional resources myself to make sure that we actually messed up by letting something like that.
It's from Oversights of Golarion.
God damn it, Oversights of Golarion! You're so full of things that are situational but can cause huge problems in various scenarios.
See, Oversights of Golarion says everything in this book is legal.
Oversights of Golarion says everything in this book is legal, and no campaign rulings can ever oversight
reverse it.
Tisk. Anyway, I guess so. We talked about this. One other thing I wanted to talk about that we didn't talk about is what happens when key NPCs or villains are threatened or killed. So I did have one of these situations come up in Council of Thieves, where the PCs knew who the final villains were going to be, and in Part 4 they decided that they wanted to short-circuit things.
Early Part 5, I think.
Early Part 5, yeah. And they decided they wanted to short-circuit things by attacking the final villains there. So I was thinking, like, okay, well, they're going to trigger a final fight here, and I want to make sure that if they do trigger the final fight, that it's going to be satisfying for them. So I gave the final villain a Bracelet of Friends, so that the final villain would be able to call in some of the other main villains. So the PCs would then have like this really challenging and interesting fight where they would confront everyone. And I sort of decided, like, if they can beat this here, then they have legit won the final boss encounter, and things are going to change throughout the campaign to ramify through that, and they haven't been cheated out of that experience. But on the other hand, like, if they don't beat it here and they have to run away, then that's a way for them they'll gain a lot of intelligence about what they're fighting. And I should have a player come up to me afterwards and be like, wow, I can't believe you let us do that. And it's like, well, yeah.
You mean the one player who really pushed for it?
The one player who really pushed for it thought I was going to say no. And I'm like, just like 5 minutes. All right. We need to have a way to bring these other people in. Bracelet of Friends. Okay, then they're going to come in and they're going to have this fight.
If we had Aura of Justice, everything would have died.
If you had Aura
of Justice, a sentence you could say about any encounter, because Aura of Justice is just auto win. But
now that's why that fits into one of those categories we were talking about specifically for high level play, and it's okay to have your enemies run away when the PCs come and buff to the guild with stuff like that.
Statler says the intelligence gathering worked both ways. Well, yes, because as it turned out, we fought this fight. It was the final encounter with some extra enemies that Linda had created, and all of like the top enemies from Book 6. Mm-hmm. We were at the beginning of Book 5, and it was supposed to be from the end of Book 6. We very clearly would have killed the enemy that is like the main BBEG, and probably his sister as well, if we had stayed. Then we would have all died. Mm-hmm. So they and we, like, both sides ran away because they were not willing to lose the actual leaders of their organization, and we were not willing to all die.
Yes.
But we could have we absolutely could have had a Pyrrhic victory question mark
Yeah.
where the PCs died while taking out the actual enemies.
But I mean, in that end, yeah, you both learned huge amounts about each other's fighting styles, and then the PCs were able to level up and learn new tricks, but the NPCs didn't get stronger themselves, but they recruited a few more allies and things like that. So you knew what you were getting into.
That's true. It was a little harder because they had those extra people that you added in. That because what didn't they summon like a succubus anti-paladin after they fought us?
Yeah, they did summon a succubus
So they
anti-paladin
had
after the
Aura
fight.
of Vengeance to cancel our Aura of Justice.
Yes.
It's the only thing that can beat Aura of Justice is Aura of Vengeance.
So yeah, they got some more resources and things like that. I still really like how like the enemies tried to run away in the end with the Well of Many Worlds, and they opened it up, and I rolled randomly on a chart of planes, and it ended up going to Nirvana. Like there was like a 2% chance. It's like these creatures from hell are terrorizing and capturing and torturing clerics of Shellen. Oh yeah. Look, you just opened it up into Shellen's
Let's rewind a bit.
Yes.
Because we were heavily affiliated with the Church of Shellen and we're using it as a base. So the villains had captured a bunch of people from the Church of Shellen and threatened to like use a blasphemy on them if we came. And we came and they used a blasphemy.
Yes.
And all the low level Shellenites died. And that was the first thing that happened in the fight. We then completely annihilated the villains, but not before they used the blasphemy. The one survivor was like a cleric class level devil.
Yeah.
And because he had cleric levels, and you know how that works in PF1, right? You get to add twice as many cleric levels as CR because of a non-associated class. So he had like hundreds and hundreds of hit points. So
yeah.
We had killed everything else, and he was not even that hurt. But he realized everything else was dead, and he was about to be next. So he was like, well, I still got the Well of Many Worlds as part of our plan. I'm going to open it, and it was Nirvana. And one of Shellen's neutral good Gale Azadas came out.
Yeah, it was like, you know what, I rolled this. Okay, you know what?
It's like, this is what you get for blaspheming all those clerics of Shellen.
So not only did he not get to escape, but the PCs had another powerful outsider that helped them win.
We
didn't
that need that against that one injured devil cleric.
You didn't, but it was just funny. And that it was just funny, and then like so that was
right. Now their plan, if people are wondering, wait, I know their plan was to open a Well of Many Worlds to hell in this one spot where they knew the Well of Many Worlds would go to hell. We ambushed them before they got there, in another place where there was a prison where they were keeping the clerics of Shellen.
Yes. And then I rolled on my random chart of planes.
Linda knew that they didn't know where that one would open up to.
And then I laughed for like 5 minutes straight, and then finally was able to tell the players what happened.
That was pretty great.
Yeah. So I guess that's but I mean that's a long digression into just me
random
telling
charts
about your character. But yeah, random charts are
another
useful.
way that things could have to be improvised if something weird happens on a random chart.
Yes, exactly. That was another example. And I mean there wasn't a random planar chart, so I made one earlier on when I had the Well of Many Worlds, and I knew I might possibly need it.
And important NPCs dying is not only the villains. It could be an important NPC who's not an evil NPC for the plot. Like, the patron of the PCs is not a spoiler to say in War for the Crown that your patron at the very beginning is Martella Lothid, because the first thing, she's in the player's guide that she's your patron. But, like, there's a time during Book 1 where she's on the map, so she could be killed at that point during Book 1. And I'd have to improvise something, like whether Eutropia has her raised, or whether you get a different patron or something else. Like, there are times when important NPCs who are not evil are threatened and could be in trouble. So
yeah,
improvisation is important for that too.
If you're writing a published adventure, it's very important if you have these NPCs. In published adventures, it's very important to have like, how do you handle these NPCs and things like that. There's often going to be tactics that's basically like, as soon as the PCs do anything, all of the enemies attack them instead of this person, or things like that. And it's just good to keep in mind too whenever you have an NPC in harm's way, how you're going to handle if they need to get killed.
Yep. And the typical bait and switch of, well, a different NPC does all the same things can work wonders. Like, well, Eutropia has more than one random person who's working for her who's disaffected, and we will replace Martella.
And especially if it's early on, you can just like and you haven't really established that much about the one NPC who ends up getting replaced, you can take the traits and characteristics and knowledge and things like that, anything you've worked on for that first NPC that hasn't been revealed to the players, and just pop them onto the next one. Yeah, like I was saying, until the players have seen it, it's not locked in stone. And that also goes for like if you sort of the stereotypical example of like, you've prepared this dungeon and then the PCs don't go there. All those rooms and encounters and things like that could very well appear in some other later location that they do go to.
And you can always come up with something else. Like, sometimes the NPCs die. Sometimes you have a weirder situation, which we might talk about more in Linda's campaign's Kingmaker, where one of the players is just very low attention span on his characters, but likes clerics. So he starts by playing a cleric, and then just keeps changing his character to be like, can I play that NPC cleric you just introduced? That character was interesting. And then having all of his previous characters leave the campaign.
And then saying that he really did, then being very adamant that he'd be upset if I NPC'd any of them, therefore making it so that there weren't really any clerics in the kingdom, and that were reasonable to be of that high level. So
like, you can't turn my previous character into an NPC. I would be upset with that. So
okay, fine.
So we ran out of like every possible cleric that we could use in Kingmaker, and we bought a Staff of Life named Anti-Alex, because Alex was the name of the player, who kept playing the clerics and sending them out of the kingdom.
Yes. So I ended up having to introduce like a level 11 cleric who was venerable and like not healthy enough to adventure, just so it'd be like, okay, you still have someone who can cast the spells, but there's no way this character's going on adventures with you.
But just to be someone who's in the kingdom who can provide the spellcasting services of a fourth or higher level spells from the cleric spell list, because until that venerable cleric came to our kingdom, Alex ran us out of all characters who matched that description.
That's correct. Do you folks have any other questions?
Yeah, I was going to ask at the last time that we pivoted, but does anyone have either a question about a situation, an improvised type thing, or a wrinkle that came up in their campaign, or a different sort of sub-problem with improvisation that we haven't talked about yet? If not, we still have a little bit that we haven't talked about, because we talked about in organized play the idea of creative solutions versus run as written. And I think we made it clear there that run as written does not mean you literally have to do exactly what is written on every page.
Yeah,
it just means you can't negate the facts of...
Yeah.
A lot of the advice we've given you so far about, oh yeah, it was actually stone. Or, oh yeah, the encounter happens a dungeon happens somewhere else, or this is a different NPC. Those are things you can't really do in organized play. Like, if it's not stone, then it's not stone.
I actually want to talk about tactics as well.
Oh yeah.
And how to handle tactics. So the idea with tactics in organized play scenarios is that you play with those tactics unless those tactics become invalidated by what the PCs do. And the phrase like the tactics become invalidated by what the PCs do is kind of deliberately mushy and vague, so that you can decide what that means. Like if you have a table that comes in and they're just absolutely destroying the NPCs in a certain way, then having them react in a different way because the tactics didn't assume that the PCs were gonna, if it says like, oh yes, they're gonna start by casting these 2 buff spells and then things like that, but the PCs just completely crush that NPC's ally instantly in the first round, then maybe they're gonna switch to become more offensive and things like that. So you do have sort of that flexibility of when things start to go sideways in the combat, how they might react. Another thing with that is that the tactics will often just say like, they attack the PCs, but it doesn't say how they attack the PCs. So if you have a group, you can very much use who gets attacked, when, and how as a way to calibrate the difficulty of the encounter. So if you know that you have, for example, a low-level character that's playing up and a high-level character, having them, metagaming a little bit on your, on the GM side to have the enemies focus on those high-level characters. First of all, they're probably going to be more dangerous once they start to attack, but just having them start by choosing those higher-level characters so that you're not going to be endangering the low-level PCs as much, the people who are playing up, but you're going to be having the higher-level characters have more of a challenge. And especially like if there's also like the fact that there's different ways to run the combat that are more tactically ideal and less tactically ideal. So if the PCs are doing really well, leaning more on the going into your tactical knowledge to run things more optimally. Whereas if the PCs are having trouble, having the NPCs, maybe mock them a little bit and be like, ah, yes, and they're going to spread out their damage among the different PCs, and they're not going to use all their best tactics, or they might take time to set something up that's a little suboptimal, or to cast another buff spell, or to heal themselves when going all out would be more ideal. So like I roll in the open. I don't hide my rolls, but I do change my tactics pretty severely depending upon how experienced and how high level the characters are.
It's been my experience that if there ever is a tactic within combat buffing or anything like that that is not like a good tactic, that gets invalidated about 75% of the time before the NPC's
Yes.
first turn. In the other 25% of the time, the NPC is dead before their first turn. So I've never actually run those tactics pretty much because when do PCs not invalidate the tactic of this guy, the Inquisitor, takes his time. He starts with Divine Favor and putting up his judgment. On the next turn, he casts Blessing of Fervor on himself and puts up his Bane. Then on the third turn, he starts attacking the PCs.
We've been trying to increasingly put
He's
those
a
into
solo.
we've been trying to increasingly put those into the before combat as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's important to keep in mind that the invalidate tactics is deliberately a squishy term
Yep.
that GMs can use to make sure that the encounter is satisfying as they can for the PCs. But I guess another thing is that what this does not mean is it does not mean that you can then add additional creatures or give the creatures additional hit points and stuff like that, because that's not within the scope of organized play. And I have seen some GMs do that.
Yep. The one thing you can do that is very mechanical, that is actually sort of a change, but not really, is enforce environmental effects that most GMs forget to enforce. Because I remember there's still a not as of yet overturned Mike Brock post from a long time ago that says, remember you can enforce environmental effects that people usually forget about if they're in the scenario. Like if the scenario says it is a foggy night, but it doesn't remind you about concealment, you can enforce the concealment.
Mm-hmm. Or if the scenario says that it's raining, or
Yeah.
Also keeping in mind lighting and darkness is important as well.
Or if it's in a jungle and someone forgets that oh so memorable 30% mischance from the foliage, that is the game's only not 20 or 50% mischance.
And keeping in mind too the descriptions of the area and the difficult terrain and things like that, and we do try to put all that in. But
sometimes improvising is all about figuring out what the right thing for your PCs is. Because I can tell you, if you're going to cheat the dice behind your screen, players are going to get suspicious of you, but they kind of won't think about if you're really good at tactics, they probably won't think about the fact that there was another tactic you could have done. Mm-hmm. Unless the NPC maybe is a brilliant tactician and you do something really, really foolish. Then they might be like, why did Karzug just sit in a charged path that is literally allows me to pounce him from a teleport spot that he knew where I was appearing?
Yeah. So I would say with that, like when it comes to fudging the tactics down to a certain point, you want to keep it believable, but particularly with new players, making sure that their characters live to fight another day is important.
Yep, that's also true. Plus, sometimes the thing that you can do with tactics that is actually more effective for the monster is also a little less deadly. For example, with attacks of opportunity in Pathfinder 1st Edition, doing some weirdo combat maneuver with your reach and your attacks of opportunity before the PCs can get up there, and so that they can't strike you back for not having improved that combat maneuver.
Yeah.
Like, disarming their weapon or tripping them before they get up to you is actually probably going to keep the fight going longer and be more interesting. Is probably more effective than bashing them with your ×3 weapon, but it sure does avoid the Minotaur possibly getting a Great Axe crit and just insta-killing the person, too.
Yes.
So that's a situation where the better tactical decision is also the one that can save the PCs from a fluke problem.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so it looks like during all this time that nobody did have any additional questions. Maybe we've just been extremely thorough. And bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.